You can discover a lot about someone's character by playing tennis with them. In my experience, men who behave politely and respectfully on the tennis court tend to act the same way in their daily lives. On the other hand, I once saw a man show the worst kind of athletic behavior while playing with his closest friend. It did not surprise me later to learn that this same man left his family and ran away with another person's wife. Then there is Frank Callahan. Frank is a large man who used to play football at Georgia Tech until a knee injury ended his career. After an orthopedic surgeon treated his injury, he switched to tennis. However, he plays tennis in a football player's style, unleashing powerful serves and often hitting the ball into the net from the baseline. I can still beat him, though. I enjoy moving to the net to put pressure on him. Most of the time, Frank tries too hard to get the ball past me, resulting in it bouncing off the back line. His footwork is another story. Let's just say that whenever Frank chooses a line, he always makes sure it benefits him. Because of this, he insists on playing matches with me since he cannot stand losing to the little guy. I may be thin and wiry, standing 6 feet tall, but compared to Frank, who is 3 inches taller and weighs approximately 75 pounds more, I'm definitely smaller. Despite not feeling eager to play with Frank, it is difficult to avoid since we both live in the Eden Point neighborhood north of Atlanta. Atlanta is known for its strong tennis community, and our neighborhood was designed around a clubhouse featuring a pool and numerous tennis courts. Courts are crowded because so many people enjoy playing. The Atlanta Law Tennis Association League has numerous teams, making it quite difficult to avoid encountering someone like Frank Callahan. However, the positive side is that I get to play with many wonderful individuals. For instance, my mixed doubles partner, Penny Patterson. I became acquainted with Penny through my wife, Melissa. Melissa is a Pilates instructor, and many residents of Eden Point attend classes at her studio, including Penny. Unfortunately for me, Melissa is not interested in tennis, but when she learned Penny was searching for a partner, she introduced us. For about 1 year now, Penny and I have been teaming up. The club where we played today's match was located in Stone Mountain, so I offered to drive Penny to save on gas. Considering the way traffic builds up on Saturday afternoons, we gave ourselves 45 minutes to arrive. As Penny stepped out of the driveway, I once again pondered why she was still single. Part of the explanation lies in the tragic loss she suffered 3 years ago, when her husband died in a car accident. After a long period of mourning, one way Penny handled her sorrow was by taking Melissa's Pilates classes, and another was by returning to tennis, a sport she had played in high school. The result of all this activity is a fit, slender woman with dark hair in her early 30s. I assumed someone as attractive as Penny would have no shortage of suitors, but she kept telling Melissa she simply had not met the right man yet. As she opened my car door, I greeted her, "Hi, Penny, are you ready to beat them?" Today, she smiled broadly and said, "Don't doubt it, Michael. I've been eager for a rematch with those guys for quite some time." We were going over our game plan as I merged onto the I-285 freeway when my cell phone suddenly rang. "Hey, Robert, you must be joking," I said, but Robert reassured me. "No, everything is fine here." I sighed. "All right, we will reschedule for another day." Penny Patterson gave me a puzzled expression as I took the next exit ramp and started driving back home. "That was our opponent on the phone," I explained to her. Robert told me it had just rained and the courts were unfit for play. Atlanta is infamous for its sudden downpours that can flood one neighborhood, while a few miles away the sun is shining brightly. Penny looked clearly upset. "Darn, I was really looking forward to playing tonight," she said. I tried to cheer her up. "Listen," I suggested. "Why don't we head back to the club? We can practice and maybe there will be someone available to play with us." Pulling up to the main entrance of Eden Point, I turned onto the road that led to my house. "I just want to stop quickly and pick up my check for this quarter's club fees," I told Penny. "It won't take long." I parked by the curb and hurried inside. I had written the check the night before and left it on the dresser so I knew exactly where to find it. But as I walked down the hallway, I heard noises coming from the master bedroom, sounds I was not supposed to overhear. "Oh, please do it again," someone said. "Yes, like that," came the reply. It was Melissa's voice. What on earth? I silently crept down the hall and peeked inside the room. Melissa was lying exposed on the bed with her legs apart. A man crouched between them, dominating her with his mouth and hands. As she moaned and gasped, I felt as if I had just been in a terrible car crash. I was frozen, Unable to move or think, everything shifted so suddenly that I could not grasp what was happening. Then the man rose and raised Melissa's legs high to make penetration easier. No, this cannot be real, I thought, recognizing the figure of Frank Callahan. I heard her moan as he entered her, and then she cried out, "Oh God, oh yes, oh God." I recoiled from the door as if struck. The scene was unbearably cruel. My first instinct was to rush into the room and attack him. But what would that accomplish? I despaired. They have already betrayed me, and fighting him won't reverse that. Besides, even if I landed a first punch, he is far bigger than I am and could still crush me completely. Yet, I refused to let him escape without consequence. Standing frozen, I suddenly remembered Penny Patterson waiting for me in the car. Oh no, I have to get her home first before coming back to deal with this, I thought. I retraced my steps down the hallway and went out the front door. For days, I felt on the verge of vomiting. I glanced up and saw Penny watching me through the car window. Moments later, I climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine. I don't know how I looked, but certainly not well. "Are you okay?" she asked. Michael anxiously glanced at Penny, searching for answers. I was silent, gripping the steering wheel with all my strength as I steered the car toward her house. When I arrived, I parked the vehicle, and without meeting her eyes, I said, "I'm sorry, Penny, but I cannot go with you today." She asked with growing worry, "What happened, Michael? What happened?" When I remained quiet, she reached over to switch off the ignition, grabbed the keys, exited the car, and approached my door. I turned toward her and pleaded, "I have to leave, Penny. Please give me my keys." She responded firmly, "No, not until you tell me what is wrong." Still silent, she opened the car door, took hold of my arm, and declared, "You are not going anywhere until you come inside and explain what is going on." Mechanically, I stepped out and let her lead me inside. After a moment, she returned carrying a glass of ice water. I absent-mindedly took a sip as she observed me. When I set it down, she clasped my hand gently and said, "Tell me, Michael, what happened in there?" Suddenly, all my defenses melted away. I leaned back against the couch and tried to speak, but my throat tightened again. Another sip of water followed. I confessed, it was Melissa and Frank. She stared at me, stunned. "Explain," she urged. "They were there together in our bedroom," I whispered. She sighed in disbelief. "No, that cannot be. Melissa would never do something like that." The vision of the two together haunted me. The memories came flooding back to me violently, and I felt a tear slip down my cheek. I never imagined she was that way either. I gasped for breath as the pain in my throat grew stronger. Could there be another explanation? "Michael, could you have been mistaken?" she inquired. I understood she was trying to help, yet it did not calm my fury. When I glanced inside, she was lying on her back. When I left, he began having sex with her. "So tell me, Penny, am I wrong?" She flinched at my harsh sarcasm. "I'm sorry, Michael, I wasn't questioning you, I just hoped there might be some other reason." A sharper pain struck me, and with Frank Callahan of all people, I said fiercely, "How could she allow that huge fool near her?" "I suppose that explains why Frank started attending Melissa's Pilates class." Penny hesitated. "Did he take her class?" I shouted. "She never told me." My anger still smoldered. "Thanks a lot for warning me," I said bitterly. Now Penny was hurting. "That's not fair, Michael. I had no idea there was anything between them." "I'm sorry, Penny," I said. "I didn't mean to snap at you. I'm just struggling terribly right now." She gripped my hand. "It's okay, Michael. I can only imagine how you must feel at this moment." I stood up. "I have to go," I told her. "I need to return there and discover what is really happening. You won't do anything violent?" "Michael, no. I just need to get some answers." She squeezed my hand again. "Please keep me informed about what is going on, Michael, and let me know if there is anything I can do to help." I thanked her and made my way back to my car. As I drove home, fear gripped me because I did not know what awaited. I thought about the many questions I wanted to ask and tried to guess how she might react. I prepared myself for tears, denials, and angry words. What should I say to all that? How would my friend feel if he was still around? My heart pounded, adrenaline rushing through me. When I entered the kitchen, Melissa must have heard me because she appeared, wrapped in a robe with her hair covered by a towel. "You came back early," she said with a bright tone. "How was the game?" "We got caught in the rain," I replied, my voice fragmented. "Oh, I am sorry you could not play," she said. I imagine Penny was upset. I just looked at her without saying anything. I was not in the mood for casual chatting. They called about the rain right after we left, I told her softly. She blinked but kept the same expression. I am back inside, I said. My heart raced. I saw you and Frank together, I confessed. Out of all the situations I had pictured, Melissa's reaction was not what I expected. I'm sorry you had to find out like this, she said calmly. I asked, is that everything you will say? You cheated on me, and that is your apology? I caught you, and you are not even going to say sorry for being with him. How long has this been happening? Don't you have anything to explain? She folded her arms and gestured to the table in the breakfast room. Come sit down, Michael, she offered. I prefer to stand, I answered. Angrily, she said, suit yourself, and sat down in her chair. I stood there frozen by her total lack of reaction. I said, look, Michael, we were going to tell you soon anyway, but I guess this just speeds things up a bit. I am leaving you, Frank Callahan, and I love each other. I'm moving in with him, and we plan to get married as soon as the divorce is final. I bent down carefully to avoid falling, and before I could respond, she jumped up saying, wait here, and then disappeared into our bedroom. A few minutes later, she came back holding a stack of papers and offered them to me across the table. She said, it does not have to be bitter. I do not even want alimony from you. I withdrew all the money from our savings account, but since I am leaving you the house, it is more than what you would get in court. It is fine with me if you just sign the papers so we can all move forward with our lives. I looked down at the papers. It was a divorce petition. In disbelief, I asked, have you seen a lawyer already? What about our marriage? What happened to the last 10 years we spent together? She replied, I'm sorry, Michael. This was not planned. It just happened. Just accept it. It is what it is. Deal with it. I shouted back, except that my beloved wife is sleeping with that man, Frank Callahan, in our own bed, except that our marriage is over. She stood up and said, I am disappointed, Michael. I expected a more mature response from you. Then she turned and walked away. In the bedroom, I sat at the table staring at the divorce documents before me, struggling to comprehend what was unfolding. If someone had questioned me earlier that day, I would have declared my love for my wife and assured that our marriage was strong. Yet by the afternoon, I discovered she was planning to leave me for another man. That was a moment of true mental conflict. Amid the quiet, I heard the buzzing of a cell phone followed by fragments of a conversation about how he perceived us. Naturally, she acted as you might expect in such a situation. When she came back, she was fully dressed and held an overnight bag along with some cosmetics. She said, since you brought it up, I have no intention of staying here tonight. Frank will come for me. We'll return on Monday when you are at work to gather the remaining items. I asked, so you are leaving just like that? She replied calmly, yes, that is how it should be. I responded with bitterness. What do you want me to say to our friends? She sighed and answered, look, Michael, Frank and I haven't done anything wrong. We refuse to hide or act like criminals. We plan to maintain an active social life. In fact, tomorrow night, we will probably attend a reception at Eden Point. You won't need to explain anything because everyone will already be aware. At that precise moment, a car horn blared outside. Melissa glanced out the window and said, Frank is here. I am leaving. She shut the door behind her, leaned in once more, and looked at me with insistence. Just sign the papers, Michael. The sooner you do it, the better it will be for all of us. Then she walked away, leaving me sitting there for who knows how long. Emotions surged through me like the cars of a train speeding through a busy intersection. One moment I was boiling with anger, then I found myself recalling joyful memories. And in the next instant, I felt overwhelmed by sadness. I told myself that I had treated her like royalty, then questioned what I could have done to drive her away. I repeated to myself that I was better off alone until loneliness took control. The sudden beep of my phone startled me, and I answered without hesitation, hoping deep down to hear Melissa's voice. However, it was Penny who spoke first. What's up, Michael? She asked. Not very well, I responded. She left me, I said. Penny asked if I had heard the news. What news? I replied in disbelief. I'm sorry, Michael, she said sadly. Frank was boasting about it at the club. I thought to myself, this was already happening on Sunday. I called the captain of our men's team. There was no way I wanted to play today. Sorry, Joe, I told him. You will have to take me off the roster today. I have some personal matters to attend to. Yes, I heard, he said kindly. Sorry to hear that. Good luck. I thanked him but knew that more misfortune was coming my way. I spent the whole day inside the house essentially hiding, though it hurt me to admit that. There were sports on television, but I did not watch. My mind kept wandering back to my marriage with Melissa. Why did it fail? When did she stop loving me? I was convinced she had truly fallen for me when she married me right after college. We did not break up during senior year. He proposed to her during the Christmas break. She was studying physical education and health. Whenever my fraternity brothers saw her dressed in workout gear, they teased me relentlessly. She had a unique mix of charm, fitness, and attractiveness that was nearly impossible to resist. From the moment I met her, I stopped trying to fight my feelings. We seamlessly adjusted to married life. I landed a wonderful position in Atlanta, while she became an instructor for an aerobics class. After several years, we managed to save enough money to make a down payment on a house and discovered the perfect place in a new community called Eden Point. I believed we were genuinely content there. At Eden Point, I had earned several promotions at my company, and Melissa decided to launch her own business. By that point, we had enough funds to lease a space for her studio in one of the nearby strip malls. Her business was thriving, and our savings were steadily increasing. We developed many friendships and acquaintances, especially in Eden Point, and even discussed starting a family within a year or two. Our intimate life had quieted down somewhat, but I was not surprised since my job kept me busy, and the daily Pilates sessions could exhaust anyone. Reflecting on that time, I realized things had noticeably slowed during the previous 6 months, although I hadn't been aware then. I also recalled that Melissa sometimes seemed distant, as if lost in thought, but whenever we were together intimately, I felt better than ever, and I believed everything was fine. Melissa shared the same feelings. Obviously, I was mistaken. I mentally reproached myself. How could I have been so oblivious to not realize she had found someone else? How could I fail to see she no longer loved me, but had instead fallen for Frank? Callahan. The only explanation I could grasp was that when you love and have faith in someone, you do not search for clues of betrayal or dishonesty. No, I thought with bitter irony, you just have to wait until the truth hits you. Unexpectedly, on Monday, arrived at work early, trying to get ahead. Around 9 o'clock, I called my lawyer's office to schedule a meeting. When the secretary asked why I did not want to mention Melissa or our situation, I said I needed to update my will. Soon she called back to say there was an opening just after lunch. Upon arriving at the office, Jonathan greeted me in the lobby. He was a former classmate and someone I had turned to when Melissa and I first prepared our wills. Settling in his office, he gazed at me with worry. "Is everything all right, Michael?" he asked. "I understand you want to change your will. Neither you nor Melissa is ill, are you?" I appreciated his care but reassured him it was nothing serious. I then handed him the documents Melissa had given me on Saturday. As he read quietly to himself, he eventually looked up, expressing sympathy. "I'm sorry to hear this, Michael. Do you think if there was any hope of reconciliation? I do not believe so. She has already left our home and moved in with her boyfriend. She told me they plan to marry as soon as our divorce is finalized." He shook his head. "I never imagined this. You two seem like the ideal couple." Then his demeanor shifted, and his voice became professional. "Considering these circumstances, as your legal advisor, I recommend you sign this agreement immediately." So just like that, 10 years of marriage were wasted, I said with bitterness. He shook his head with patience. "In cases like this, Michael, you have to stop thinking with your emotions and start using your logic. I think Melissa has made you a very generous proposal, much better than what you would receive if you try to contest her. She might be motivated partly by guilt, but I am willing to bet the main reason is to encourage you to accept quickly so she can marry her new partner. Although it might feel now that you are at a disadvantage, the truth is if your marriage is truly over, that offer is the best outcome you can hope for." I realized he was right. Honestly, after what she had done, I did not want to remain married to her anyway, but it still felt like he and Frank had outplayed me at a game I never knew I was involved in. Jonathan's voice softened again. "Look, Michael, I know the attorney Melissa hired. If you sign, we can promptly submit the settlement agreement to the court. It will legally record what she has proposed, and then if she has second thoughts and she wants to return, and if you are open to taking her back, you will have 30 days to reverse the divorce." I understood that was unlikely to happen. "May I borrow your pen?" I asked. Once I got back to the office, I went straight to human resources because I had to make numerous adjustments to my health insurance, the 401k plan, and various spousal benefits. The clerk helping me seemed very experienced with this process since he quickly filled out all the necessary forms. While I was signing, I looked up and caught him staring at me. I figured I would no longer need to announce anything at the office now. That evening, on my way home, I stopped by one of the nearby eateries and picked up takeout dinner. However, once I arrived, I discovered that Melissa had been there earlier that day and taken everything she wanted. Naturally, all her makeup was missing, but I was taken aback to see some pieces of clothing still left behind. Inspecting them more closely, I realized they were items she no longer wore. I figured I would donate them to Goodwill. Feeling down, I explored further and found out the bedroom was not the only room she had cleared out. Our fine china had vanished along with most of the serving sets we had received as wedding gifts. In the kitchen, I noticed the dishes and a quality set of carving knives were also gone. Several pieces of furniture were missing, and when I entered the living room, I saw large portions of our CD and DVD collection had disappeared as well. The collections had vanished too. While going through our things, I realized she had left our wedding album untouched. Somehow, that hit me harder than all the items she took. It felt like she wanted to erase every memory of our life together. I returned to the kitchen and put the groceries I had bought into the fridge. After her betrayal, I had lost all appetite. I made a clear mental note to change the locks immediately. How is it possible to go from a happily married man to a solitary divorced man in only 3 days? I kept asking myself. It all seemed incredibly unfair. For the next week, I lived in virtual isolation, arriving at work early and leaving late. The rest of the time, I stayed inside the house. The pain of having Frank Callahan take my wife away was almost unbearable, especially since I was powerless to stop it. I admit, I had dark daydreams involving baseball bats and brass knuckles. Sometimes I even imagined assassins or car bombs, but then reality set in. Did I truly want to ruin my own life just to take revenge on a womanizer and a wife who couldn't stay faithful? By Friday, I decided it was time to break free from my shell. I hadn't done anything wrong, and I had no reason to feel defeated. I picked up the phone and called Penny. "Hey, partner, don't we have a tennis match planned for this weekend?" I asked, trying to sound cheerful and optimistic. "Oh, Michael, I am so happy to hear from you," she replied. "I quickly thought about reaching out to you so many times, but decided perhaps you preferred some solitude for a while." "Thank you, Penny," I said, my voice softening. "It has been a tough week." I shared everything that had occurred and then inquired about what had happened at Eden Point that I had missed. She paused briefly before confessing that our situation had become the main topic all over the neighborhood. "You would think they could find something more interesting to talk about," I remarked sharply. "Maybe so," Penny agreed. "But Frank and Melissa are struggling with it. They have been socializing at the club every evening since last Saturday. Frank almost openly boasts about whoever is the better man, and Melissa clings to him like a lovesick schoolgirl. You could hear the bitterness in her voice. That is just disgusting, Michael." I immediately quit her Pilates class and told her I could no longer be her friend, she said. Her loyalty made me feel somewhat better. "What about the others, Penny? What are people saying?" I asked. "I suppose it is what you would expect, Michael. Some are very displeased with Frank and Melissa and do their best to avoid the couple, while a group of people always seems to cluster around Frank, praising his bravery, if you catch my meaning. But for most, it is just a sad and awkward situation, and they try to steer clear as much as possible. Logically, I understood it would be that way, but part of me hoped otherwise. The community would disgrace Frank Callahan and Melissa, driving them away forcefully, but I was resolute not to let my frustration stop me. For what it is worth, I am not planning to live my life in hiding. I told Penny Patterson we have a match scheduled for Saturday, and unless you prefer otherwise, I am determined to play with my partner. I told her I'm pleased, Michael. She assured me passionately you can rely on me. I purposely arrived at the tennis courts a bit late to avoid discussing subjects I wanted to avoid. It did not help much because as I neared the tennis pavilion, I could sense the whispers of my neighbors and teammates. I understood their interest, but I still despised the sensation. Upon seeing me, the captain of our mixed doubles team hurried to me. "Michael, I'm truly sorry the opposing team made last-minute adjustments to their roster, and some matches already began, therefore. I cannot alter anything if you do not wish to compete." "I understand." "What do you mean?" "Mary," I asked. "I do not understand. It's Frank," she explained. "You and Penny should play Frank and his partner." Oh no, I thought that was the last thing I wanted. At that moment, Penny came over and realizing the situation, her face turned white. She pulled me aside and whispered, "We do not have to do this, Michael. It is no big deal. We will just lose and face someone else next week." No, I said loud enough for Penny. To stand up, I am not going to back down from that scoundrel. For the rest of my life, I will have to confront him, and I might as well begin immediately. Penny gazed at me with concern, but I turned back to Melissa and reassured her, saying it was all right. Penny and I were just here to have fun. It turned into a disaster. I played far worse than I had in recent times, and my obvious frustration was affecting Penny too. Meanwhile, Frank Callahan was dominating the match. His strong ground strokes slammed the net with the force of explosive rockets. To make things worse, he relentlessly mocked me throughout the game. "Come on, Michael, you can hit harder," he shouted after I made a feeble shot, which he then crushed easily. Another time, he yelled, "Your wife can hit harder." "Oh, wait, I was mistaken. You do not have a wife." I lost control completely. A crowd formed to watch our little contest, and I looked up to see Melissa standing by the fence. To her credit, she muttered complaints about some of Frank's remarks, but never glanced my way. At one moment, I made a weak second serve that Frank smashed straight at Penny. The ball struck her shoulder and nearly knocked her over. I rushed to the net, gripping my racket, ready to confront him fiercely, but Penny grabbed my arm and begged me not to approach the net. "It was a fair shot," she said calmly. "I am fine. I am not hurt. This is just part of the game." I glared at Frank with pure hatred as he pretended to tie his shoelaces. Eventually, I went back to my seat full of anger and disappointment. The final score was 6-26. Enduring a humiliating loss, I clenched my teeth and approached the net to shake hands with our rivals. Frank Callahan's partner appeared ashamed of his performance and apologized after our handshake. Frank, however, strode over without offering his hand and said it was a great time. "Let's do it again whenever you're in the mood for some fun." Then, confidently, he turned around, walked over to Melissa, and kissed her boldly through the waist-high fence. I don't know what Penny Patterson noticed on my face, but she grabbed my arm and pulled me away. "He is trying to provoke you," she warned. "Frank wants you to get into a fight. Don't let him upset you for my sake." I sat down on the bench and someone handed me a glass of icy water. After sipping a little, I poured the rest over my head. Never had I felt so low. I apologized to Penny for my poor play, though she protested quietly. I got into my car and drove home, tossing my clothes into the hamper before dragging myself into a long shower. The water ran off me for half an hour, cooling eventually. When I stepped out, I wiped myself dry and collapsed on the bed, burning with anger and shame. I knew why I had lost. I had let Frank dominate me, and that only made it worse. He had gotten under my skin and influenced Melissa, too, though in a different way. The outcome was clear: to turn a loser like Frank into a winner. I silently vowed that I would change this. I was no longer willing to endure Frank Callahan's bullying, and Melissa felt the same way. I needed to find a method to confront both of them. I just had to figure out the approach. Lying on my bed, I recalled what my former tennis coach used to say: "Play to your opponent's weaknesses." It sounded promising in theory, but how could I apply it here? I know that when I begin tackling a problem, my mind often keeps working on it even during other activities. In fact, I have often discovered that stepping away for some time allows new solutions to appear more easily. That is exactly what happened this time. I mulled over the issue for a bit, then set it aside to spend most of Sunday finishing the yard chores I had been putting off. By evening, exhaustion made falling asleep effortless. The next day at work, a potential solution came to me. It might end up costing quite a bit, but I figured if it works, it would be worth every penny. Around mid-morning, I contacted one of our top salespeople. "Hey, Jerry," I said after getting him on the line. "Any chance you could join me for lunch today?" My treat, of course. Jerry was especially inclined since I was the one buying. We met at a bar and grill, a place I knew was a bit run down, but served excellent food. After we placed our orders, Jerry looked at me and said, "Hi, Michael. Sorry to hear about you and Melissa. I thought you two were doing well." I sighed. "Yeah, me too, Jerry, me too. Actually, that is exactly why I wanted to talk to you." "Of course, Michael, I am all ears. I'm glad to assist in any way I can." "All right, Jerry, here is my question. When you entertain your top clients, have you ever had to hire an escort?" He gave me a strange look. "No, Michael, absolutely not. It goes against company rules and I would never consider it." I leaned over the table toward him and said, "Jerry, this is not about the company, and we are not discussing business. This is purely personal, if you catch my meaning." He stared at me for a moment before a spark appeared in his eyes. "Oh, I understand," he said. "It must have been quite a dry period for you with your wife leaving and no dating in between." He hesitated and then leaned in closer. "I do know one of the finest services in town, but remember, Michael, they only serve the top clients. Their women are exceptional, but they might be expensive." I smiled and told him to leave that to me. Just tell me how to reach them and what I should expect. Over a burger and a beer? That was exactly what he explained. After lunch, I reviewed the notes I had taken rather anxiously. I hoped I was making the right decision. Then I recalled how Frank Callahan had mocked me and how Melissa had announced coldly that she was leaving. I chose to take action. I dialed the number Jerry had provided. A cheerful male voice answered. "Hello, can I assist you?" "Yes, I would like to speak with Mr. Henry Miller," I said as I had been instructed. "This is Mr. Miller," the voice answered. "What are you looking for?" "Something from Grove Press." The caller responded with a request for my name. I considered using a false identity, but Jerry made it clear that I needed to state my real name. "They are always cautious due to the vice police," he explained, "and they go to great lengths to ensure no cop is trying to trap them." I gave my actual name. "Are you calling from your office?" Mr. Miller asked. I confirmed that I was, but emphasized that this was a personal issue unrelated to my company. He acknowledged that, and then requested the main switchboard number of my workplace. I offered it, but asked if he preferred my direct line instead. He declined, saying he would call the main number and ask for me so that we could handle the matter properly. I thought it was clever because if the operator answered, he would be confident he was reaching a real company and not a police station. If she transferred the call to me, he would know I genuinely worked there. It was not utterly foolproof, but fairly reliable. After I provided him with the main line, he ended the call immediately. Minutes later, my phone rang and the operator put him through to me. He then asked for my cell phone number to allow contact after hours if necessary. After I gave it to him, he said that now that we had bypassed the identification checks, I could explain how the service could assist me. I told him I was seeking a very particular companion who might be available for a... There are several situations that could extend beyond a month or even longer. The voice spoke up saying this is somewhat unusual since we rarely commit to such an extended period. We might be able to assist you, but it will come at a steep price. He mentioned a figure that made my eyes widen in disbelief. I took a deep breath trying to keep calm. "It will be fine, Mr. Miller, understood. Do you have any particular preferences?" I asked. "Yes," I replied. "She must resemble a goddess." He smiled and said, "Beauty lies in the eye of the beholder, but I believe you can find a companion who meets your expectations." He paused briefly. "Do you have a pen ready?" When I confirmed, he gave me their website link. I noticed the URL began with HTTPS, meaning it was a secure site. Upon entering the site, he surprised me by instructing that for the username, I should type Anasnin. It then provided a numeric password. "Please be aware, sir, your username and password will change once you select your companion. This ensures security for both you and us." Confirming my understanding, he went on to explain payment. "Once your choice is finalized and the session is arranged, your credit card will be charged the agreed sum. Additionally, our clients often show their gratitude directly to our companions. If you are pleased with the experience, we suggest tipping 25%. I quickly calculated in my mind. This has to work, I thought, or I will face not just financial ruin, but utter embarrassment. "Excellent, sir. Whenever you are ready." When you are ready to make your choice, please visit our website where you can handle all further details. "Good day, sir." Immediately after, the call was disconnected, so I waited until I got home in the evening to visit the website Henry had provided. The main page only showed Capricorn services, along with the tagline that stated they serve the most discerning clientele. Using the username and password Henry gave me, I logged in and saw a window that looked like it had been taken directly from a Victoria's Secret catalog. Every woman shown was stunning, making me question why they were in escorting instead of modeling. In fact, I even considered whether the images might have been snatched from some modeling website as part of a deceptive trick. But my friend Jerry assured me that Capricorn was legitimate, so I decided to take a chance. I planned to select a blonde, but a photo of a woman with shoulder-length dark hair caught my attention, and I clicked on her impulsively. The confirmation on the screen informed me that Ranan would reach out within 24 hours to set up a meeting. Then, I was asked to provide my credit card details. Once the card number and expiry date were confirmed, the screen suddenly went black and I was abruptly kicked off the site. Intrigued, I tried to log into Capricorn again, but this time the welcome page did not recognize my username and password. After a second try, I was pushed back to the main page. I admired the robustness of their security and found it to be a positive indicator. If they took such care, maybe their service really was as outstanding as Jerry had mentioned. The following day, I was anxious, eagerly awaiting a call from Rana. At one moment, I even thought about withdrawing from the arrangement because my small scheme was going to cost a considerable amount of money and success was uncertain. However, when I stepped into the break room for coffee, the two secretaries who were chatting instantly fell silent and turned away as I entered. It took no effort to guess that I had been the subject of their conversation. The sting of becoming office gossip only made me more determined. Whatever happened, I was not going to remain a powerless target if I could prevent it. It was only after dinner that my cell phone rang. When I answered, a charming voice softly said, "Hi, Michael. This is Rana calling. I am excited to meet you." I hesitated but then proposed meeting for dinner to talk about my request. When she agreed, I suggested the same grill where Jerry and I had eaten before. It was a cozy, dimly lit place far enough from Eden Point to avoid unexpected encounters with neighbors. She chuckled, saying she had never had the chance to dine there and looked forward to it. With those words, she ended the call. Here we go, I thought. The grill awaits. It was not very crowded on this weeknight, which was one of the reasons I had picked it. And the dim lighting also fit my needs perfectly. But when she entered the room, it was as though a spotlight had shone directly on her. She noticed me standing up, approached confidently, and shook my hand. "Hello, Michael," she said with her melodic voice. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person." She sat down, and I followed her. I must have been staring because she chuckled and asked, "Well, how do I look?" We have all seen movie stars on the big screen or models in magazines. They are beautiful, but somehow not real. However, now I was sitting opposite one, and the impact was breathtaking. The young woman before me was genuinely dazzling. Deep dark eyes, high cheekbones, full lips, hair perfectly framing her face, and a figure that was athletic yet feminine. I could describe her endlessly, but the truth was that for several moments, all I could manage was to stare silently in awe. She smiled and broke the quiet, saying, "I'll take that as a compliment." "Oh yes," I stammered, feeling shy as my voice cracked slightly. Thankfully, just then, a waitress arrived to take our orders. I cannot recall what I chose, but I settled on a green salad with dressing on the side. As she wrote down her own order, it became clear that the waitress was also captivated by her presence. She kept stealing glances until finally she blurted out, "Aren't you on television?" Rana smiled gently and replied, "No, I'm afraid not." "No?" she said, and the waitress walked away, muttering quietly to herself. Their brief interaction allowed the logical part of my mind to come back online. I glanced at Ran and curiously asked, "I bet that happens to you a lot." She instinctively nodded and replied, "Yes, it happens quite often. May I ask you something? Why are you not pursuing television or modeling instead, you know?" I inquired, hesitating slightly at the end. "I've explored those options," she confessed, "but that world is very harsh. I can look attractive, but I am just one among many. The chances of breaking through are about the same as a basketball player making it to the NBA. Still, in this line of work, I stand out, and unlike modeling or acting, I didn't have to go hungry for years paying my dues. From the start, I was maximizing my income. By the time my looks begin to fade, I will have saved enough money to live off the investments for the rest of my life. And if fortune favors me, I might find a wealthy man who desires a trophy wife and won't care what I did to earn my living." I could not help but agree silently. Although I did not approve of her career choice, her reasoning was practical. At that moment, the waitress returned with our meals. After placing Rand's plate, she looked again and said, "Are you sure you're not on television? I just feel like I have seen you before." Rand shook her head and responded, "I don't think so. If I were, I would probably remember." I held back a chuckle as the waitress hurried away. As we began eating, she eyed me thoughtfully. "Michael, why don't you share what is on your mind?" Henry asked if it was something unusual. I blushed and started to tell her my story. As I recounted my conversation with Melissa after catching her in Frank's bed, Penny gave me a look that was both sympathetic and somewhat cold. She replied when I mentioned Frank Callahan and his behavior, nodding with a knowing expression. I have met many people like him, she said, wiping her mouth and folding her hands on the table. So what exactly do you want to accomplish and how do I fit into this picture? I spent the next 15 minutes explaining what I hope to achieve over the next month or so. When I finished, I admitted I had many doubts about my plans, but I simply could not stand by while they treated me poorly without standing up for myself. Now that I had met her, I was beginning to think it might actually work. She smiled broadly. What a wonderful compliment, she said, then leaned forward across the table. You know what? I think I'm going to enjoy this. Great, I said eagerly, reaching out to shake her hand and seal our agreement. She laughed and returned the handshake firmly. Partners in crime, she said with a sly smile, then straightened up and did something with her body I hadn't quite noticed before. Suddenly, she radiated pure sensuality. I realized I was clearly attracted to her. Well, she said in a soft, seductive voice, now that we have finished the serious part of our meeting, how about we move somewhere a bit more comfortable? Relax, my mouth suddenly felt dry, and I had to take a sip of water before speaking. No, I said, today we just need to get to know each other better. She responded with a radiant smile. Do you not find me attractive? Oh God, no, I stammered. I mean, yes, but that is not really the point. I am just trying to concentrate on the plans we have, and it would be better if I did not complicate things between us. Do you understand? Then I handed her an envelope across the table, adding, I have something extra for you. I had placed some large bills inside earlier. She raised it triumphantly before slipping it into her purse. Afterward, she changed her demeanor and her seductive side seemed to fade. I believe I may understand you, Michael, she said, tilting her head slightly to study me. You are quite a fascinating man, and I think I will enjoy our little adventure together. With those words, she stood and left, leaving me seated alone in the stall. For some reason, I felt drained. What a woman, I thought. We had arranged for the initial phase of Operation Honey Trap to start on Saturday, shortly after lunch. The temperature in Atlanta was already rising, and I guessed the pool at Eden Point would be busy. I was a bit anxious about whether Rhiannon would actually come, but soon after noon, a BMW Z4 pulled into my driveway. She arrived at my door with a small bag, and when I raised my eyebrows, she said, These are my swimsuits. She glanced around and smiled. So this is the suburbs. You like it here? I frowned slightly. It was until now. Not long ago, she gently touched my cheek, saying we would fix that. At the club, we parted ways to head towards the changing rooms to get into our swimsuits as planned. I stepped out first and discovered 2 lounge chairs next to a table shaded by an umbrella. Hardly had I settled down when I spotted the tall Frank Callahan coming toward me. Well, Michael, he said quietly, I never expected to see you in the pool today. I thought you might be taking lessons from a pro to improve your tennis. I sensed his intention to provoke me, but replied calmly, No, today my girlfriend and I plan to relax by the pool and soak up some sun. Frank was not ready to drop the subject. Easily. Oh, you have a girlfriend now? I would like to meet her. By this time, our talk drew the attention of everyone nearby, which actually pleased me. Well, you're lucky, Frank, she is just coming, I said, nodding toward the entrance of the women's locker room. To everyone's surprise, instead of a bikini, Melissa appeared in a one-piece swimsuit, yet somehow it looked far more alluring. It was crafted from a shiny, silvery fabric that gleamed in the sunlight, capturing the gaze of both men and women alike. I heard a soft click and realized she was wearing stiletto heels. They accentuated her calves, thighs, and hips beautifully. As she neared us, I moved my eyes upward from her shoes to the suit, noticing something unusual. Then it struck me. The swimsuit was made of a different kind of material. The finest fabric I had ever encountered hugged every curve of her body perfectly. Upon closer inspection, it was clear the suit had no lining at all. It appeared to be painted directly onto her skin. She approached me, slipped her arm through mine, pressed her chest against my bicep, and kissed my cheek. Great, honey. You found us a spot, she said warmly. Then she turned to Frank. Who is your friend, Michael? I glanced at Frank and was pleased to see his mouth agape as he stared at the breathtaking sight before him. I said, Rhiannon, meet Frank. Frank quickly snapped his mouth shut and offered his hand for a handshake. Welcome to Eden Point, he declared with some pride. If you need anything, Please do not hesitate to ask. Raynon smiled gently and said, How kind. She then asked me, Is everyone here as adorable as Frank? I replied sharply, No, Frank is one of a kind. She smiled at him again, expressing gratitude for making her feel so welcome. When he stood silently, she looked down with a smile and said, You can let go of my hand now. Embarrassed, he stammered, Well, I must be going. I hope to see you again, Raynan. I hope we meet again. With those words, he awkwardly turned and walked back to the opposite side of the pool, glancing back a few times. I looked in the same direction and saw Melissa sitting with her arms crossed, clearly unhappy. That was the mood between Rannan and me. As we settled into the Shaw lounge, she took my hand and drew me closer so I could softly speak into her ear. I think that went quite well. I squeezed her hand reassuringly. You were flawless. She smiled warmly and planted a quick kiss on my lips. I knew she intended it to be friendly, but I could still feel the sensation of her lips a good 15 minutes later. Then she lay face down on the Shaw lounge and asked, Will you apply some suntan lotion on me? Michael. Without hesitation, I gladly agreed, and I thought I heard male voices nearby moaning softly for the next several hours. It seemed like everyone at the pool that day wandered past us to sneak a look at my new girlfriend. I'm certain that every one of my male teammates stopped by, and after exchanging pleasant hellos, I made sure to introduce them to her. She was gracious with each man and chatted as if they had been longtime acquaintances. At one moment, I leaned in and whispered, You should have entered politics. She simply smiled and gave me a sly wink. Working in my profession, I am merely one step away from that. I laughed. When everything quieted down, she leaned closer again. Which one is she? I immediately understood and directed her toward Melissa across the pool. Very well, she said. Leave it to me. She slipped on her high-heeled shoes and clicking with each step, she strode to Melissa's side. Bathing in the pool, bending at the water's edge, she kicked off the shoes and elegantly dove into the shallow end. When she rose above the water, she bent her head forward and then swiftly flipped it back so her hair created an elegant arc above her head, splashing water into the air in a fan-like shape. I was completely captivated. I had seen this move before only in commercials, but witnessing it in reality was truly breathtaking. Then with one fluid motion, Raynan gracefully slid out of the water onto the deck facing Melissa. Water trickled down her body as she tossed her hair back, drawing attention to her figure. Afterwards, she slipped on her mules, adding several inches to her height, and walked back to where I was standing, watching. Reluctantly, I diverted my gaze from Rannan to Melissa. She looked at me with annoyance before turning sharply to Frank and speaking to him with a stern tone. Then she grabbed her belongings and headed for the exit. Frank followed her, casting a glance back at Raynan once again. Raynan settled gracefully into the chaise lounge, closing her eyes. I heard her quietly say, Mission accomplished. While we were there, only one unpleasant moment occurred. As we were getting ready to leave, I looked up and saw Penny Patterson walking towards me. Oh no, I thought. I completely forgot that Penny's women's team was playing today. What could I say to her? Hi, Michael. It's so great to see you outside again. Maybe we can meet up and play some more, she said, stopping suddenly as Rannan stood up and took my hand. Penny gasped in surprise. Who is that? She asked. This is Rannan, my companion, I replied awkwardly. Penny blinked and stared at Rannan silently for a while, then she extended her hand and said, I'm Penny. It was nice to meet you, she added, then looked back at me once more. I need to clean up. I'm quite dirty after our match tonight. See you around, Michael. Without waiting for a response, she turned and dashed off. Who was that? Rannan asked, intrigued. That was Penny Patterson, I explained. She is my mixed doubles partner. Interesting, she replied. I silently scolded myself for not planning ahead about how to handle Penny. I didn't want to reveal my plan, but at the same time, I didn't want Penny to misunderstand my intentions. Damn it. Not long after that, Rannan and I agreed to call it a day. I felt we had achieved everything we wanted today. As we left the pool, I could have sworn the atmosphere in the conversation shifted noticeably. Once we got back to my apartment, I let Rannan use the shower while I dried off and thought over the day. Apart from the unexpected meeting with Penny, everything went even better than I had hoped. I demonstrated to Melissa that I would not simply sit back and grieve her passing forever. More importantly, I proved that I was not trying to replace her and that I had personally grown in significant ways. I thought confidently. Let her ponder that for a while. So how do you think it went? I heard a voice behind me ask. Turning around, I saw Ranan standing there wrapped in a bath towel. You were fantastic, I answered with enthusiasm. You were everything I had hoped for and even more. She made a playful motion with her fingers. Suddenly, the towel slipped down to her feet. Would you like to celebrate? She asked. For a moment, I was frozen, unable to breathe. Everything about her was simply flawless. Her breasts were high and proud, not enormous but perfectly shaped. Surprisingly, her areolas and nipples were a soft pink, not dark brown. There was not a trace of fat on her body. On the contrary, her abdominal muscles were well defined, inevitably drawing my eyes to her smooth and completely bare Venus mound. Her legs, strong and beautifully sculpted, seemed to go on forever. I gasped and realized I had been holding my breath. Pulling myself together, I stepped forward, bent down, and handed her the towel she had dropped. I'm sorry, Ranan. This is just not a good time, she smiled. Okay, I was just checking, I replied. She threw the towel over her shoulder and moved away from me. Oh my God, how had I missed the chance to really see her behind earlier? When she returned, she was already dressed and had packed her bag. I gave her a sealed envelope. Thank you, I said warmly. Today had been exactly what I needed. She tilted her head in amusement and looked at me again. Do you want to go back to Melissa? She asked. Suddenly, I shuddered. No, I answered firmly. This was not a one-time mistake or a loss of control. She had consciously discarded me like unwanted junk. I would never, under any circumstances, take her back. That's what I believed. Then she said, I was just wondering, anyway, are we still on for next week? I said with a broad smile. Throughout the week, I made certain to attend tennis practice at the club. I wanted everyone to realize I was no longer hiding. Glad you showed up on the field, our team captain mentioned. My teammates welcomed me with friendly pats on the back and bright smiles. Behind me, I overheard someone mutter, "Lucky son of a gun." I smiled, knowing the impact Runan could create. A couple of days later, I came back to the court for mixed doubles practice, but Penny was absent. Our captain explained she had called in sick. After practice, I immediately called her at home. Are you all right, Penny? I inquired. It was unusual for her to be unwell. She replied, It's nothing serious, probably just a small bug going around. I offered, Can I bring you anything? I would be glad to help. She responded sharply, No, thank you, but I do not want anything anyway. It's better if you keep your distance. I don't want you to catch what I have. Hesitantly, I agreed, but added, If you feel worse, call me immediately. I'm worried about you. She vaguely promised to do so and said she needed to rest, so I let her go. I was uneasy. Penny had always been remarkably healthy and full of life, so it troubled me to think something might be wrong. Our little run-in at the pool last Saturday probably did not help. I still felt unable to confess my honey trap plan to her, fearing it would ruin everything. But I hated the thought of Penny misunderstanding me. I hoped she understood. She forgives me once this is all behind us. I believe the following stage in my plan was arranged for that weekend. The club was organizing a dinner, and Melissa and I intended to perform there. When she came to my place, she was dressed quite differently from the last occasion we met. I remarked, Wow, you look like you just stepped out of a fashion magazine. Her outfit was simple, comprising a skirt, a casual jacket, and a blouse. But despite its simplicity, the fabrics, styles, and accessories screamed haute couture. She gave a little curtsy and said, Thank you kindly, sir. Actually, Nordstrom just got these in. She added, But do not worry if you are not familiar with the brands. My main focus today is the ladies, especially one lady in particular. I replied warmly, I cannot speak for the wives, but I think you will still have a strong influence on the men. As we reached the parking area in front of the clubhouse, Melissa turned to me and said, We need to adjust our approach a bit today. We should separate and mingle with everyone present. That will let me accomplish what I need, she explained. I agreed, saying it sounded like a solid plan. When we stepped onto the patio where the dinner was happening, I instantly realized that we were both right. Once more, most of the men openly admired Melissa. The wives behaved more reservedly, yet I overheard several remarks from them about her evening attire. A few of the more daring women asked where she had sourced her clothing, and soon, Melissa was the center of attention sharing her fashion secrets. Happily sharing shopping advice with them after a brief conversation, she and I returned to our meal. I cautiously asked if she had any success. She answered quietly that she had been incredibly busy. She added seriously that she had been gaining a lot of insight into what wives really think about the situation with Melissa and Frank. More importantly, she revealed she had been making life miserable for my ex. She also mentioned teasing her fiancé quite a bit, which she definitely did not appreciate. I just smiled because it was clear that Rihanna knew exactly which buttons to push. I was talking with one of my teammates when Melissa passed by and pointed at me. Curious, I followed her to find out what she wanted. When she faced me, her cheeks were flushed with anger. "Looks like you are not wasting any time jumping back into the dating world," she said huskily. I replied sarcastically that I didn't realize there was a required waiting period. She countered that I probably wasn't up to the challenge and asked where I had found her. Since she never met her during our marriage, I explained simply that I met her through work. Melissa warned me to be careful because this woman was more than I could handle. I couldn't resist saying she was wrong because I trained with her every chance I got. She responded fiercely that if that was true, I better keep her away from Frank. Then, with those words, she walked off. I smiled to myself knowing that everything was unfolding exactly as I had hoped. At that moment, I noticed Penny carrying a tray of food. I knew she was part of the entertainment committee, but I wasn't sure if she would feel well enough to come tonight. I hurried over to her and took her hand. She blushed when she noticed me. "I'm so glad you're feeling better," I said. "You should have called and told me you were well enough to come over." "I guess I wasn't certain until the very last moment, Michael. Besides, I figured you'd be here with your new girlfriend, and I didn't want to disturb you then." Rhiannon walked by laughing, chatting with one of my teammates, and I realized I had guessed correctly. Penny continued with a frown. She started to walk away, but I grabbed her arm again. "Wait, Penny. We need to discuss our upcoming match." She paused, then seemed to come to a resolution. "Michael, I have a lot going on lately, and I've decided to drop the mixed pairs to concentrate on the women's team." I was stunned. "You can't do that, Penny," I whispered. "You're my partner. Who will I play with?" Penny glanced over my shoulder, and when I turned around, Rhiannon was standing there. "You'll find someone, Michael," Penny said. "Now please let me go. I have to put the food away." When I released her hand, she hurried off. Rhiannon took my hand and led me to an empty table. Once seated, she leaned toward me and softly said, "Just so you know, this girl is in love with you." "What? No, that's impossible. She's my tennis partner. She was in Melissa's Pilates class, and if I'm correct," Rhiannon ignored me and added, "you might be a little in love with her too." "No, I'm not," she protested. "You're mistaken, she is just a good friend," maybe she said doubtfully. "Regardless, I believe we've done everything possible for today, so let's leave now." Upon returning to my house, I asked Rihanna to explain what had occurred between Melissa and Frank Callahan. She flashed a self-satisfied smile. I approached where their food was laid out and sampled some, making positive remarks. Melissa was visibly irritated by my presence, but there was little she could say at that moment. Then I complimented her outfit and she felt compelled to respond in kind. This allowed me to share where I had purchased it. I realized she recognized the garments and understood their value. Although she did not speak, her eyes seemed almost green with envy. "That sounds like Melissa," I said. "She definitely cares about fashion and takes pride in her taste." At that point, Rihanna continued. Another woman requested Melissa's help in the kitchen. Though reluctant, she had to leave me alone with Frank Callahan. As soon as she left, I sampled another of their dishes. While she spoke, Rihanna mimicked her gesture, standing straight and smiling broadly, no doubt aware of the impression she made on me. Once I caught Frank Callahan's gaze, I began flirting earnestly, asking if he played football. This gave him an opportunity to show off a bit. While he did so, I moved closer and touched his chest, making a comment. He emphasized how much larger he was compared to you and commented, "I like tall men." She laughed softly. I thought he might act on it right then and there at the table. "Wow," I said. "It is no surprise Melissa was so unfriendly." "I'm doing the best I can," she replied, with clear, insincere modesty. "And I can't believe Frank would think you were flirting with him," I added. She smiled mockingly. Men like Frank are so confident in themselves that it never crosses their minds to doubt a woman's intentions. The irony is, they tend to be the worst lovers, I chuckled. If what Rannon claimed was accurate, it would be a fitting outcome for Melissa. I handed her the envelope. Do you believe we are ready for the next step? I inquired. Absolutely, she said. The event at your club will be ideal for what we have planned. Then she turned and made her way toward the front entrance. What, no attempts at seduction today? I asked with a grin. She smiled over her shoulder, I wouldn't count on that, then turned back and gave a slight sway of her hips that made my desire spike. After she left, I grabbed a beer and settled down to mull over what had just happened. On one hand, I was thrilled that the honey trap succeeded, even if Melissa no longer wanted me. I realized she was upset with how fast I found someone to replace her, and even more disturbed that the substitute was far more attractive than Melissa ever could be. It was all quite enjoyable, but I could not ignore the guilt I felt regarding the situation with Penny. Maybe Renan was correct, I pondered. Could I actually have feelings for her? Penny had caught my attention from the very first moment Melissa introduced us. I found her attractive, slender, athletic, elegant, with a charismatic and outgoing nature. However, because of Melissa, I had always tried to keep my relationship with Penny strictly friendly and casual, like tennis partners. I was convinced that Penny wanted the same, especially as she was grieving the loss of her husband. Then I recalled what Rannon had said about Penny. Could it be true? If Penny was interested in me, why was she avoiding me completely? And why did that affect me so deeply? Why was I repeatedly turning down the most captivating woman I had ever probably met? Could my feelings for Penny be part of the reason? In the end, I gave up trying to find answers and went to sleep. I did not have the solutions to my questions, and even if I did, I would not know how to handle them. I decided the safest choice was to stay focused on the plan I had made. The annual spring dance at the club was a major event, always attracting a large crowd. The ladies used it as an excuse to dress elegantly, while the men reluctantly wore tracksuits and some even added ties. I was hoping Frank and Mar would attend. I had warned Renan about what to expect from Penny, and I was eager to see what she would wear for the culmination of our plan. So I was both surprised and disappointed when she stepped out of the car wearing jeans and a t-shirt. Admittedly, they were the tightest jeans I had ever seen. A woman had her t-shirt provocatively tied over her bra-covered breasts, yet I had anticipated something else entirely. My expression must have betrayed me because she gently touched herself as she walked past, saying, "You didn't really believe I would risk ruining my dress by coming here, did you? Just let me use your bedroom for a moment and then I will be ready to leave." I had already slipped into my sport coat and trousers, so I impatiently shuffled across the room while she got dressed. I smiled quietly to myself. It felt like we were a long-time married couple. A few minutes later, her voice called out, "Michael, can you come here? I need some help with something." I returned and pushed open the bedroom door. My breath caught. Rannon stood there wearing the sexiest lingerie I had ever laid eyes on. Her strapless bra and panties were a rich chocolate brown trimmed with delicate white lace, perfectly accentuating the curves of her breasts and the alluring space between her legs. The stockings matched in dark brown and were held in place by a garter belt that drew even more attention to her most private areas. She took a small step in her stilettos and turned around, revealing that her panties were actually a thong, displaying the full roundness of her backside. Then, turning to face me again, she asked in a soft smile, "Will I?" I was tempted to step forward, but she stopped me with a smile and a raised hand, saying, "No, no, not now. I can't risk you messing this up. Now that I have your blessing, get out of here and let me finish putting on my dress, I think." I stumbled slightly as I made my way back to the lounge. After a few moments, she appeared once again. This time, she wore a sleeveless dress in a whitish tone that matched the trim of her lingerie. The contrast between the dress and her hair was striking. As she moved across the room, I realized the dress was clearly custom-made because the material seemed to glide over her body like flowing water. Each step revealed the curves of her hips, and when she turned, the shape of her rear was sharply defined. The slit on the side of her dress extended all the way up to where her stockings began, and when she stood to one side, her flawless leg was on full display with a breathtaking effect. Naturally, it was hard for me to ignore what she wore underneath that dress. I swallowed hard, then said, "I think you might cause a few heart attacks tonight." I meant it. She just smiled and reached out her hand, inviting me to escort her out. The club's patio was cleared for dancing, with paper lanterns hanging above us. Though slightly tacky, I enjoyed the soft lighting and gentle music. Melissa slipped into my arms to dance, and it soon became clear she was far more skilled than I was. As we moved, she rested her head on my shoulder, and in that instant I decided I didn't mind that she had this life. I simply appreciated the sensation of her body close to mine and the joy of her presence. Then she lifted her head, pulling just far enough away to meet my eyes, and said, "You realize this suburban life is not so unpleasant that a girl could not grow accustomed to it." Before I could respond, she suddenly became tense. Uh-oh, battle stations. I turned to see Frank Callahan approaching, dragging behind him a clearly unwilling Melissa. "Hello, Rana, and hello, Michael," he murmured. "Very pleased you chose to join us tonight. How about we change partners for a few dances?" When I agreed, he spun Rana away, leaving me standing awkwardly beside Melissa. I extended my hands to her. "Would you like to dance one more time for old time's sake?" She hesitated but eventually agreed. As a new song began, I started dancing with her. This was a curious moment. I loved this woman and had been married to her for 10 years. Yet after all that had happened, all I felt was a burning urge to make her experience what she had caused me to feel. Was our marriage truly so terrible? I wondered. She sighed and said, "No, Michael, it was not like that at all. We had some good years and happy times, but then everything fell into a routine." After a while, I was no longer excited about our relationship. When Frank came into the picture and so obviously showed how much he wanted me, I just fell in love with him. Really fell hard, Michael. It was like being back in college. She glanced up at me. "I did not want to hurt you, Michael, but I had to do what was right for me. Can you understand that?" "I understand," I replied harshly. "You've chosen to move on." "That is not what I meant," she said in defense. "I told her it was fine, I had switched anyway." She winced as she recalled who I was seeing now, and I felt a sense of satisfaction. If everything went smoothly from this point onward, it could only improve. I looked up and noticed Frank Callahan and Ranan approaching us hand in hand. "There's your date back, Michael," Frank said with a faint grin. "Have a good evening, then." He then strode away with Melissa struggling to keep pace. Ronan and I kept dancing. "How did it go?" I whispered in her ear. There was almost an audible laugh in her reply. "The hook is truly set," she said. "I'm convinced I'm falling for him." She added, "Come up with some excuse for Melissa and we'll meet at the club once everyone leaves. I'm just a bit nervous about this part. Timing has to be perfect." I assured her, "Leave that to me. Women are well versed in that kind of thing." Then she whispered into my ear, making me flinch. As darkness fell, I noticed the crowd thinning rapidly. I must have been looking around because Rainan caught my attention. "Sorry, Michael," she said. "I guess Penny Patterson didn't make it today." I asked, "Am I really that easy to read?" She replied with a slight smile. "Crystal clear." When we reached my house, I pulled out another envelope and handed it to Renan. "I might not get another chance to give this to you," I said. "I wanted to make sure you received it." She took it almost hesitantly. It seemed like she stared at me for a moment before her expression shifted. The alluring goddess had somehow vanished, leaving behind a genuine yet still attractive woman. "This is the most unusual task I have ever received," she said, "and you are unlike any client I have ever encountered." It was slightly awkward at times and I blushed, but I appreciated every moment. I took both of her hands in mine and thought about taking my revenge. "I knew I required someone with extraordinary qualities," I answered, "but I never imagined I would find someone like you, and I will always remember you." I moved closer and kissed her lips. She held the kiss for several seconds before quickly pulling away. She blinked rapidly a few times and quickly said, "No need to spoil your lipstick." Then she looked at the jewel-studded watch on her wrist and added, "It is almost time we should leave. Give me exactly 30 minutes. With that, she left the room, got into her car, and drove off. I stood still for a moment before making a decision. Rana and I had not discussed this, and I hoped I would not mess things up. But I had to take a risk. I pulled out my cell phone. "Michael, why are you calling at this hour?" Penny asked. "Penny, I am about to ask you the biggest favor of my life. Please, do not ask any questions, just meet me at the club in 30 minutes. "What is going on, Michael? What does this mean?" "Please, Penny," I pleaded. "I do not have time to explain, just trust me and come back in 30 minutes. "Sorry, I have to go." I hung up and headed towards. At the clubhouse, I wondered if she would come. The odds were low, but I believed it was my only opportunity. When I arrived at the parking lot, there were two cars already there. I took out my cell phone once more and made another call. Frank Callahan's angry voice broke through the line. "Where are you?" she snapped. "It's not Frank," I replied. "It's Michael." "Michael, what do you want and why are you calling so late?" she demanded. I said, "I'm calling because I know where Frank is. He is with Rainan." She shrieked, "Where are they?" I told her, "Just meet me at the club as soon as you can." Then I hung up. Frank's house was only a few blocks from the club, but she must have run faster because soon enough, I spotted her dashing through the backyard of a nearby house. I caught up to her before she reached the club. "Where is he?" she demanded angrily. "Quiet," I hushed her while grabbing her wrist. "You have to stay silent so we can catch them." I guided her to the club's door, which was unlocked, and we quietly stepped inside. As we entered the room, faint sounds of rustling clothes reached us. Through the dim light filtering from the windows, I saw Melissa's eyes grow wide. Quickly, I pressed my hand over her mouth to keep her quiet, then pointed toward the light switch on the wall. She nodded in understanding, and we silently moved over to it. I flipped the switch, and the room was immediately bathed in light. Frank tried to get up, but his pants caught around his knees, causing him to trip and fall back to the floor. He suddenly sprang to his feet again, hurriedly pulling his pants up behind him. Rihanna rose from the couch where she had been lying. Her dress was tossed over the back of the couch, and as she stood up, she slipped her bra back over her bare chest. She remained dressed only in her bold lingerie, leaving no doubt about what was happening. I had to hold back Melissa as she began shouting at Frank. "You bastard! How could you do this to me? We were supposed to be married." Rihanna clung tightly to Frank's arm, pressing her body against his back. Now that he was finally wearing pants, Frank regained his confidence. He looked at me with a daring expression and then addressed Rihanna, asking, "What do you want to do now, baby?" "Oh, Frank," she answered in a soft, childlike tone, "I just want to be with you." She held on firmly and he embraced her protectively. Turning back to face us despite Melissa's distress, Frank's first words were aimed at me. "Well, Michael, looks like you've lost another woman." I stayed silent, but Melissa cried out, "What about us, Frank? What about us?" The tall man looked at her and replied, "Melissa, we had something good for a while, but it was never going to last. Now I have found someone better and I want to dedicate all my time to her." He glanced at Rihanna again, then turned back to Melissa. "You can't blame a guy for wanting to make a change, right?" Even through her pain and anger, Melissa couldn't help but glance at me guiltily after hearing those words. Rihanna. She turned around and carefully slipped into the dress. Then she spun back and wrapped her arms around Frank Callahan's neck. He leaned in and kissed her softly. "Come on, baby. Let's get out of here," he said, pulling her gently towards the door. "You go ahead, Frank," she replied. "I need to talk to Michael, and besides, I do not want to leave my car here. Look, I will meet you at the bar." She reached into her purse, pulled out a piece of paper, and quickly jotted down the address. "I will be right there with you, honey," she added, stroking the front of his pants and giving him a passionate kiss. He looked at her with doubt. "Are you sure you will be all right?" he asked. "I am sure, darling. Michael won't hurt me. He is not that kind of guy." Frank grinned and said, "I suppose you are right." With those words, he left the room and we heard him drive away. While our eyes were fixed on Frank, Melissa managed to break free from my hold. She shouted angrily, "You bastard!" and lunged at Rana, claws extended. Instead of recoiling, however, Rana remained calm and stood her ground. As Melissa reached her, Rana took a quick step aside, grabbed one of Melissa's outstretched arms, and skillfully twisted it behind her back. She winked at me, and I knew those self-defense lessons were going to be useful. When Melissa kept struggling, Rana said sharply, "If you do not calm down, I will have to dislocate your shoulder." Melissa stopped fighting and immediately pushed her away, turning to face her. "Listen, Melissa, there are some things you need to understand," she said. I have no concern whatsoever for your Neanderthal ex-fiancé. I have absolutely no plans to join him at the bar he is heading to." Melissa was shocked but asked why. "Why did I seduce him?" "Because that is my job. I am a professional escort. I have encountered dozens of men like Frank Callahan. They all believe they are a gift to women and constantly search for the next conquest. Do you think he truly loved you? The only thing he genuinely cared about was the chance to finally outperform Michael at something. I am sure he enjoyed making love to you, but he enjoyed it even more with Michael. Michael hired me to take some revenge on Frank Callahan and at the same time show you what it is like when a lover is unfaithful. It hurts, does not it? Melissa screamed and lunged at me, but before I could respond, a figure appeared and knocked Melissa to the ground. She lay awkwardly stretched on the floor. Penny Patterson stood over her with clenched fists. You deserve it, Melissa, after what you did. You deserve so much more. Melissa just lay there crying. It seemed to me that her emotions were hurt more than her body. Penny turned to me and I could see tears streaming down her cheeks. Is it really true? She asked. She is really not your girlfriend? No, I told her seriously. She was my partner in the honey trap we set for Frank Callahan and Melissa, but nothing more. But she is so beautiful, Penny protested. I could never compete with someone like her. Then Renan walked over and placed her hands on. Penny shrugged her shoulders as if to say, Silly girl, I was the one who stood no chance. He only had eyes for you. She glanced at me again and asked, So you never ran and stepped in again? I answered, No, Penny. He never did. I could never distract him enough from thinking about you for him to even touch me. And believe me, I gave him that chance. Penny remained silent, but looked at me with sparkling eyes, then grinned at both of us. I think it's time for me to leave. I've had tougher missions, but this one has really worn me out. At that moment, Melissa picked herself up from the floor. What about me? Where am I supposed to go? I can't go back to Frank's place, not after what happened. Penny considered her carefully. I don't know what your plans are for tomorrow, but you can spend the night at my house. I'm going to drive home with Michael. With those words, she kissed me passionately. I took her hand and decided not to let go, yet something kept gnawing at me, so I asked Ran once more, What about Frank? Where did you send him? She laughed and said, That was the location of a gay bar. I wonder how long it will take him to realize that I am not going to show up. Then her smile faded, and she stared at me seriously. Good luck, Michael. You are someone special, and I won't forget you. She leaned in and kissed me softly. I felt Penny grip my hand even tighter. Ron then faced Penny, her expression fierce. You will take good care of him, do you understand? If I ever hear that you do not, I will return, and this time I refuse to accept no as an answer. The fierce look vanished from her face, replaced by an expression I later understood was sorrowful. She reached out and gently brushed my cheek, but I doubt I will be that fortunate again. Then she rummaged through her purse and slipped something into my palm. Goodbye, she said, before turning and walking out the door, her hips moving with an enchanting grace. I glanced down at my hand and found 4 sealed envelopes resting there.